Silence doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes it means you've finally realized that not every storm deserves your energy. They thought you'd fight. They thought you'd plead, chase, explain, cry, and beg for another chance to be seen. But instead, you walked away, calmly. No fireworks, no final speech, just peace. And that, my friends, hit harder than any argument ever could. Before we begin, go ahead and press the like button if you've ever walked away from someone with your dignity intact. And make sure to subscribe, because what we're about to unpack next may just rewrite everything you thought you knew about walking away. Stay with me till the end. This one's going to open some eyes. Hey folks, imagine this. You walk into a room filled with noise, tension, and unspoken battles. You're holding a candle. Everyone else is throwing flames. And instead of lighting yours to add to the chaos, you quietly blow it out and leave. That's what it feels like when you walk away peacefully. You don't fuel the fire, you remove the oxygen. And that absence, that stillness, starts to burn far deeper than the loudest insult ever could. See, most people think closure comes from confrontation, from long talks, dramatic goodbyes, explanations that stretch into emotional monologues. But truth? The loudest closure sometimes comes from a door that shuts without a sound. You didn't walk away to hurt them, you walked away to heal yourself. And in doing so, you left behind something they didn't expect. Reflection, not revenge. That's the kind of energy they replay, not once, but 1,000 times in their mind. We live in a world that teaches you to react, snap back, type faster, post louder, but Stoicism teaches something wild. It says, be the rock, not the ripple. Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And when you finally walk away, not with a tantrum, but with that kind of strength, it changes everything. Not just for you, but for the person who thought they had you figured out. Some of you are still wondering if it mattered. If your silence spoke, let me be clear, it did. Peaceful exits leave emotional fingerprints that chaos never could. Why? Because they make the other person sit with what they missed, not what they survived. You didn't storm out, you simply stopped showing up. You didn't try to prove your worth, you lived it quietly. And when it went unrecognized, you walked. That takes guts, that takes mastery. They expected a performance, you gave them presence. They expected drama, you gave them distance. They expected begging, you gave them boundaries. That flips the script. And when the script flips, the heart starts feeling what the ego tried to ignore. That's when the real story begins. Not for you, but for them. So to every man and woman listening right now who chose peace over performance, presence over noise, boundaries over begging, this is for you. You didn't walk away because you didn't care. You walked away because you finally did. For yourself. And that, my friends, is the beginning of real power. Write this in the comments right now if you feel it in your soul. I choose peace. Let the world see where you stand. Let them know you're not afraid to walk alone when your energy is no longer respected. And if this resonated with your journey even a little, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. We've got a lot more truth coming your way. Now stay with me, because what happens in their heart after your peaceful exit is where the real shift begins. Number 1, they expected fireworks. You gave them silence. Sometimes the deepest wounds are caused not by what someone says, but by what they no longer need to explain. They were ready for a storm. They thought when you left, it would come with noise, shouting, slamming doors, an angry paragraph typed at 2 a.m. They prepared for it, maybe even craved it. Because drama, that's predictable. It's a script they've seen before, familiar, emotional, dramatic. But you didn't follow the script. You walked away differently. And that difference, it didn't echo through the room, it echoed through their soul. Imagine this, a crowded theater, and just as the lights dim, one character exits without delivering their final lines. No bow, no speech, just gone. The audience is confused, waiting, expecting, but nothing comes. That's what happens when you leave with peace instead of performance. They were bracing for the finale, but all they got was silence, and it messed with their emotional rhythm more than any explosion could have. Now their mind begins to spiral. Why didn't they say anything? Wasn't I worth a final word? Were they faking it the whole time? Or were they already done long before I noticed? That's the thing about silence. It doesn't answer questions. It creates them. It doesn't heal. It reveals. It doesn't chase. It confronts. They expected the usual, begging, long explanations, emotional logic stretched out like an open wound. But your silence, it wasn't empty. It was full of decisions, full of boundaries, full of peace earned the hard way. And that's what hurts them most, because it means they didn't break you, they didn't shatter your center. You stayed rooted and left anyway. See? Most people are prepared for messy endings. They know how to handle rage. They can argue with words. They can justify outbursts. But how do you fight against a calm goodbye? How do you defend yourself when there was no attack? That's where their discomfort starts to bloom. You didn't give them a villain. You gave them a mirror. And in that mirror, they saw the cracks they ignored, the ways they dismissed your love, underestimated your presence, played with your loyalty. Because let's be honest, folks, some people only know how to measure impact by noise. And when the noise never came, they had to sit with the question no one wants to ask. Did I just lose something I didn't even recognize while I had it? You didn't need to slam a door. You became the door. You didn't say, "You'll miss me." You just became someone who could no longer be reached. And that's what shakes them, because they thought silence meant apathy. But in truth, silence can mean mastery. Mastery of your emotions, mastery of your standards, mastery of yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." And that's exactly what you did. You didn't react like they expected. You didn't dance in their chaos. You didn't try to win the argument or prove you were right. You just walked, with clarity in your heart and strength in your step. But let's not pretend it was easy. Let's not sugarcoat it. Walking away peacefully, that's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because every part of your emotional system wants to scream, explain, plead, defend. Your heart wants to be understood. Your pride wants to be acknowledged. But your soul wants peace. And peace doesn't beg to be heard. It whispers to be obeyed. You knew you could have said something. You knew you had receipts. You had the right to snap, to prove, to post your side of the story. But instead, you chose the quiet path, the stronger path, the one that doesn't end with someone clapping, but with you standing, and maybe shaking a little on the inside, but still standing nonetheless. Now here's the truth bomb. Some people won't even realize what just happened. Not at first. They'll pretend they don't care. They'll scroll. They'll post something shallow, maybe even try to act unbothered. But beneath that, something shifts. Because silence doesn't leave right away. It lingers, like smoke from a fire they never saw coming. Your absence is not a ghost. It's a reflection, a reminder of what they once had access to, but didn't appreciate. And now, the silence you gave them is louder than the attention they once took for granted. Because you were the one who always checked in, always made time, always showed up. And now that you're gone, they feel it. Not with panic, but with a slow, sinking ache that hits them when the room is quiet and the ego isn't performing anymore. And they will try to fill that space. Oh, they'll try. But here's the catch. They won't be chasing you. They'll be chasing the feeling, the calm you brought, the safety, the steadiness. That feeling can't be faked, folks. It can't be duplicated. And once it's gone, it's missed in waves. You didn't leave a storm behind. You took the weather with you. So if you're sitting there wondering whether walking away in silence mattered, know this: it mattered more than anything you could have said. You didn't raise your voice. You raised your standards. You didn't burn the bridge. You just stopped building one by yourself. And the real impact? It isn't what they felt when you left. It's what they start feeling now, when the silence grows louder than the love they ignored. So let the silence echo. Let the questions rise. Let your peace be your statement. Write this in the comments right now if this resonates with your soul. I left with peace. Show the world you didn't walk away to get noticed. You walked away because you finally noticed yourself. And stay with me, because what happens next in their heart isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of theirs. Number 2, the absence doesn't hurt immediately, but it builds. People don't miss you the moment you leave. They miss you the moment they realize you're not coming back. At first, it's quiet, still, almost peaceful on their end. They convince themselves they're fine. They smile in public. They scroll, they post, they move, or at least that's how it looks. Because in the beginning, your absence doesn't scream. It hums faintly. Like background music they don't notice until the track changes and the silence hits them mid-thought. It doesn't crash all at once. It creeps in. See, my friends, most people don't recognize emotional weight until it's gone. Just like you don't notice your breath until it's shallow, or the warmth of the sun until clouds steal it. That's what your presence was, subtle but essential. The kind of thing they didn't know they relied on until it disappeared from their day. And they tell themselves stories to cope. It's better this way. He'll be back. They needed space anyway. They rehearse lies like lullabies, rocking their ego to sleep. But the soul can't be fooled for long, because when someone real walks out, not with noise but with calm, that absence builds pressure like a sealed jar. Slowly, relentlessly. They thought you were always going to be there, the one who reached out when things got weird, the one who forgave too quickly, the one who waited just a little too long. But this time, you didn't circle back. You didn't double text. You didn't give them another chance to make you question your worth. And that stillness? It started to echo. At first, they miss the obvious things. The good morning that used to greet them before the world did. The way you remembered their little habits, even when they didn't remember yours. Your voice on the phone, not saying anything profound, just being there. But over time, they miss the things they never saw coming. The way you calmed their storms without even trying. The way your energy made a room feel safer. The way you didn't demand attention. You just gave it. Genuinely, consistently. And now there's a space. Not just in their routine, but in their emotional foundation. Because you weren't just filling time, you were holding space. Space for their confusion, their chaos, their ego. And now that space feels hollow, not because you took something, but because you stopped offering something that was never matched. They won't say it out loud. Of course not. Pride won't let them. But late at night, in the quiet corners of their mind, that absence starts to weigh more. It starts to ache. Like a missing rhythm in a favorite song, like something they never valued properly but can't stop humming now that it's gone. They'll try to distract themselves, jump into something new, pretend it's all fine. But there's a difference between replacing presence and forgetting essence. You weren't just available, you were real. And real doesn't fade, it lingers. Real has a scent, a tone, a stillness that no one else can replicate. You didn't leave to prove a point. You left because you had nothing left to prove. And ironically, that's what makes them reflect. Not your anger, not your arguments, but your composure, because deep down, they knew you were the one who tried, the one who stayed centered when things got loud, the one who didn't just say they cared, they showed it. And now they have to sit with the consequences of their comfort. The realization that your love didn't die out, it just got quiet. It stopped knocking on a door that only opened halfway, and now that door feels cold, empty. Like something valuable stood there once, and they let it leave without really understanding why. That's the weight of absence. It doesn't come like a wave. It builds like a tide, inch by inch, day by day, until it crashes in the middle of an ordinary moment, and suddenly everything feels off. Not because of what's there, but because of what's not. And here's the kicker. They never expected to feel it this way. They thought your calm exit meant you didn't care. They mistook your silence for emotional weakness. But what they didn't realize was that you weren't abandoning them. You were finally choosing you. And that decision, that's the beginning of emotional maturity. That's what makes you dangerous. Not because you're cruel, but because you're done proving your heart to people who can't see it clearly. You didn't leave to create pain. You left because you refused to keep tolerating it. And now that you're gone, they're finally seeing what was always there. Not because you shouted it, but because your absence made it louder. So don't question your move. Don't second-guess your silence. Let them feel the quiet. Let them sit with the stillness. Let them walk through their days wondering how they didn't see the value in what was freely given to them until it was no longer available. Because the longer they sit with your absence, the more it rewrites everything they thought they understood. The more it builds, not as a wound, but as a wake-up call. And not for you, for them. Write this in the comments if this speaks to your soul. My absence has weight. Say it out loud. Show it to the world. Show it to yourself. Because the ones who walk away peacefully often carry the loudest truth. And if that truth is just starting to rise inside them, wait till you see what it reveals next. Stay with me. Number 3, they begin to rewrite the story, and you become the plot twist. They never expected you to be the chapter that closed itself without warning, and now they keep rereading it, hoping they missed a sign. At first, they thought they understood you. They had a version of you painted in their mind, predictable, steady, available. You were the one who cared a little more, gave a little extra, held on a little longer, and because of that, they assumed you'd never truly let go. They mistook consistency for dependency, mistook your patience for permanence, and that illusion, it made them feel safe, maybe even superior. But then you did something they didn't script. You walked away without drama, without shouting, without leaving a trail of broken words behind you. You left like a page being turned mid-sentence, and that shook something loose inside them. Now the story they thought they knew is starting to fall apart. Suddenly, the roles feel reversed. You're no longer the one trying to prove something. You're the one who vanished with peace in your eyes. And now they're sitting in the silence, trying to rewrite the narrative to make sense of it all. Because here's the uncomfortable truth they're starting to face. Maybe they had it all wrong. Maybe the one who cared more was actually the stronger one. Maybe the one who never left had the deepest self-control. And maybe, just maybe, the person they thought they had wrapped around their finger was already untangling himself long before he stepped out the door. You were the quiet storm, the chapter that closed not with punctuation, but with presence. They thought your stillness meant surrender. But now that you're gone, they can't stop replaying it all. Every word you didn't say, every moment they dismissed, every time you were patient when you could have snapped. It all takes on new weight. They start to remember how you never forced your way into their life, how you waited, listened, observed, and how you offered your energy without asking for applause. And now, that memory begins to shift in their mind, not as background noise, but as the anchor they didn't realize was holding everything together. This is where the rewriting begins. They go back to the first time you let something slide, the first time you forgave a delay, the first time they tested your patience, and you didn't flinch. Back then, they thought you were soft, easy, emotionally attached. But now, in your absence, those moments look different. They don't scream weakness anymore. They whisper depth. They told themselves you were always going to be around, that you were too loyal to leave, too invested to pull away. But when you did, with dignity and no explanation, that's when they realized you weren't staying because you needed them. You stayed because you chose to. And now that the choice is gone, they're left wondering why they didn't see the value in it sooner. And oh, the mind games they start to play with themselves. Did I misread everything? Was he always this strong? Was I ever really in control of the story, or was I just comfortable with the way he let me feel powerful? That's what a peaceful exit does. It flips the narrative. Because you didn't try to be the hero, you didn't try to be the villain either. You just stopped showing up for a role that no longer served your soul. And now they're left with a story full of questions instead of closure. They'll scroll back through old messages, reread conversations they once skimmed. They'll look at your silence and try to decode it like a mystery they never cared to solve when you were speaking. Because now that the words have stopped, they've become sacred. And here's the twist, folks. Your absence didn't just leave space. It created contrast. The new people in their life, they'll look loud now, erratic, surface. Because what you brought wasn't noise, it was substance. What you offered wasn't excitement, it was emotional safety, and no one else quite carries that tone, because no one else is you. This is where they start to romanticize what they once overlooked. They forget the parts that made them pull away. They remember the parts that made them feel seen. Because memory? It doesn't tell the truth. It tells the emotion, and emotion grows sharper in silence. You didn't try to change the story, you just stopped letting yourself be written into chapters that didn't reflect your value. And that decision rewrote everything. So don't doubt what your silence is doing. Don't think that because they haven't reached out, they aren't wrestling with the truth. They are, quietly, often, usually when they're alone and the world goes still. That's when the plot twist hits them again. And not because you forced them to feel it, but because you stopped giving them a reason not to. If this part of the journey hits deep, write this in the comments right now. I became the plot twist, not for revenge, not for ego, but because peace turned you into the one thing they never saw coming, the one who could leave without looking back. And stay with me, because what happens next isn't just about regret. It's about the mirror they're now forced to face, and what your absence reflects back at them. Number 4. Your grace becomes a mirror they can't look away from. They weren't prepared to face themselves until your silence handed them a reflection they couldn't avoid. There's something haunting about grace. Not the soft, sweet kind they sell in movies. I mean the real kind, the kind that comes from walking away without slamming the door, the kind that doesn't curse or cry or chase, the kind that simply ends like a candle going out in a windless room. That's the kind of grace that turns into a mirror, and that's exactly what you became when you didn't fight, didn't explain, didn't plead. You just left with your head high and your soul intact. See, when you walk away without a fight, you rob them of the usual distractions. There's no screaming to blame, no chaos to hide behind, no ugly words they can replay to make you the villain. All they're left with is themselves. And for some people, that's the scariest confrontation of all. Because here's the thing, my friends. Your silence didn't leave a gap. It revealed one. It pulled back the curtain and showed them exactly how they treated you, how they ignored your needs, how they took your presence as proof that you'd never leave. And now, Now they've got nothing to hide behind but a truth they never wanted to admit. They mishandled someone who only ever showed up with love and clarity. Imagine them standing in front of a mirror that doesn't flatter them, doesn't bend the light to make them feel better. That's what your calm goodbye became. A reflection of their own choices. The missed moments, the arrogance, the assumption that you'd always be there, no matter how they acted. And now, with you gone, they have to look at all of it, alone. And here's the wild part. It's not the loss of your attention that haunts them. It's the loss of who they were when they had it. Because when you were around, they had a mirror that made them feel stronger, steadier, more supported. You saw the good in them, even when they didn't show it. You were patient when they were careless. You made space when they were shutting doors. You offered calm when they were chaos. And now that energy is gone. They're left with the raw version of themselves, the one they hoped you'd keep loving despite the damage. But you didn't. You loved them, yes, but you didn't abandon yourself to do it. And that choice? That's the line that separates peace from punishment. Because you didn't walk away to hurt them. You walked away to protect yourself. That's what Stoicism teaches, that we don't control what others do, but we control what we allow. And when you stopped allowing disrespect, inconsistency, and one-sided love, you created a boundary that exposed the truth. They told themselves a story, that you'd never really leave, that your kindness was weakness, that your patience was permission. But now they see it was restraint. Now they see it was strength wrapped in silence. And that realization doesn't break them, it bends them, slowly, subtly, like gravity they didn't know was pulling on their chest until one day they can't breathe like they used to. And no, they probably won't admit this out loud. They may not reach out. They may not send a long message saying, "I was wrong. I see it now," because pride is a thick mask and ego has sharp claws. But behind all of that, there's a reckoning happening, because your grace is still there, echoing, not in your words, in your absence, not in a guilt trip, in a boundary. They look in that mirror and see a version of themselves that once held something rare, and now that it's gone, they can't unsee what they lost. That kind of reflection doesn't fade. It lingers. It waits for quiet moments, like when they're alone with their own thoughts, or when someone new enters their life and can't give what you gave so effortlessly. You didn't try to make them feel small, you just stopped shrinking yourself to fit where you weren't seen clearly. And now, your image lives in the back of their mind, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied something their soul can't forget. Emotional safety. That's what you were. A storm shelter in human form, and now that the storms come without your steadiness, they start to realize just how protected they once were, and how they never really said thank you for it. So don't regret your grace. Don't wish you'd been louder, meaner, messier. The world has enough chaos. What it doesn't have enough of is people who can leave with love still in their heart, but peace in their hands. And that's who you were. That's who you are. If you feel this, write it in the comments right now. My grace became the mirror. Let others see your reflection. Show the world you didn't walk away because you didn't care. You walked away because you finally did. And stay with me, because what comes next in their heart, it's not peace. It's the beginning of something they didn't expect. Doubt, regret. The slow unraveling of the story they thought they had figured out. You changed the ending, and now they have to live with it. Number 5, they realize your presence was anchoring them. They thought your silence was the absence of noise, but now they're starting to realize it was the absence of balance. At first they couldn't name it. That strange shift in the air. The heaviness in their chest, the way even the simple parts of their day now felt offbeat. It didn't hit like a crash, it crept in like fog. Slow, unseen, quietly soaking into everything, because what they lost wasn't chaos. What they lost was stability, and now that absence, it's not a void, it's a collapse. Because your presence, your calm, your reliability, it wasn't background noise, it was the foundation, the anchor holding everything steady beneath their emotional storms, and now it's gone. They didn't see it at first. People rarely do. You were the one who checked in, who noticed the small things, who listened to the pauses between their words. You were the one who stayed when it got inconvenient, who didn't need attention to give attention, the one who didn't need drama to care. And because you were always there, they stopped realizing how rare that was. See, most people only recognize consistency after it disappears, because the world teaches us to chase fireworks, not fires that stay lit. They got used to you, grew numb to your presence, took your patience for passivity, your steadiness for softness. But now, the contrast is loud because nothing new feels grounded. No one else carries that calm weight in their energy, and the people they now surround themselves with, they're either too loud, too temporary, too self-absorbed, or too detached. None of them anchor. None of them feel like home. That's what you were. Not flashy, not explosive, just safe. And safety, when it's consistent, starts to blend into the scenery until it's gone. Now they're looking around, wondering why everything feels a little less secure, why their thoughts are louder, why their emotions feel heavier, why they feel like they're drifting even when they're surrounded by people. It's because you're no longer the center that helped everything else make sense. You weren't just a person in their life. You were a force, a quiet compass they didn't know they were depending on. And here's the irony, they didn't even have to ask for it. You just showed up, day after day, message after message, call after call, holding space when they had nothing to give back. And now, when they look for that energy again, it's not there. And that gap, it's not about missing a conversation. It's about missing the quality of presence they never realized was so rare. It's like losing gravity. You don't notice it's working until it's gone, and suddenly nothing feels grounded. That's what's happening inside them now. They can't name it, but they feel it. They don't say, "I miss you." They say things like, "I don't feel like myself lately. I don't know what's wrong." Things just don't feel right anymore. Because what they lost wasn't loud love, it was quiet alignment. And you didn't leave to create that gap. You just stopped standing where you were being overlooked. That's what Stoic strength looks like. Not leaving out of rage, but out of realization. Realization that your consistency wasn't being matched, your energy wasn't being honored. Your heart was becoming a backup plan instead of a priority. So you stepped back, not to hurt them, not to punish, but because you finally saw what they couldn't, that staying any longer would mean abandoning yourself. And now your absence has a weight to it, not because you slammed the door, but because you were the one who always left it open until you didn't. That subtle shift is what makes them spiral. Because they don't know how to fix what they never appreciated in the first place. They don't know how to replace something they never fully understood. And now, it's too late, because you're not waiting anymore. You became the anchor that let go of the ship, and now the ship is drifting, not because of a storm, but because you're no longer there holding the line. That's not petty, that's not revenge, that's truth. So if you're doubting yourself, don't. If you're wondering whether your calm presence mattered, it did. You weren't background music. You were the rhythm, the pulse, the steady hand. And just because they didn't say thank you, doesn't mean they didn't feel it. Just because they didn't beg you to stay doesn't mean your departure didn't shake something loose. You were their safe space, their peace, their anchor, and now they're floating in a sea of surface-level interactions, looking for something to pull them back to the shore. But that shore was you. and you're no longer standing there waiting. So if this resonates with your journey, if you've ever felt like the one who gave quiet strength while others played loud games, write this in the comments right now. I was the anchor. Show the world your value, not with volume, but with truth. Let it be seen, let it be felt, and stay with me. Because next, we're stepping into what happens when that anchor becomes the thing they can't replace, no matter who they run to. Number 6. Regret creeps in, not because of drama, but because of dignity. They expected to feel power in your absence, but what they feel is the haunting weight of everything they never gave back. Regret doesn't knock on the door the day you leave. It doesn't hit like a train or crash like a wave. No. Regret is slow, it's quiet, it's subtle. It creeps in like a cold draft under a locked door, always there, always building, always reminding them that something once warm is gone now. And they're the reason why. At first they didn't feel it. They convinced themselves you'd come back, like you always did. That this was just another pause, not a full stop. They believed your silence was temporary, that maybe you were just giving space, still emotionally orbiting around them. But time has a way of revealing the truth, and the longer you stay gone, the more that illusion starts to rot from the inside. Now the thoughts begin, the questions that come in waves, soft but sharp. Did I push them too far? Why didn't they reach out? Why did it feel so final when they said nothing at all? And that, my friends, is where regret begins. Not from an argument, but from your lack of one. Not from a loud goodbye, but from a graceful exit that didn't ask for anything in return. See, people prepare for anger. They know how to handle guilt trips, tears, or desperate pleas. They know how to brace against chaos. But dignity? That's different. Dignity leaves no debris, no weaponized words, just the unsettling realization that you had every reason to fight. But you didn't. You didn't fight for their attention. You didn't beg for their time. You didn't explain your worth one last time like it was on trial. You just left, with your integrity still in your hands. And that's what's eating at them now. Not that you walked away, but how you did it. That's the part they can't escape. Because when someone screams at you, you can say they're bitter. When someone begs you, you can call them weak. But when someone walks away with their peace, with nothing but silence in their stride, that's a mirror. A mirror that says, I won't be part of something that doesn't honor me. And that reflection, that's where their regret is born. They remember your loyalty now. They remember how you stayed longer than you should have. How you gave chances when they weren't deserved, how you forgave what you never even got an apology for. And that's when the guilt starts forming. Not the fake kind that says, I feel bad, the real kind, the one that shows up when the lights go off, the one that whispers, you didn't just lose someone good, you lost someone solid. Now they start retracing their steps. They remember the texts they left unread, the calls they ignored, the effort they brushed off, and the irony? Back then, they didn't see your effort as effort. They saw it as default, like you were supposed to be there, like love was a service and you were always on call. But now that service is gone, the door is closed, the access has been revoked, and they don't know how to handle that version of you. The one who isn't performing anymore, the one who isn't explaining, fixing, or filling the silence with another attempt. This version of you is quiet, and that quiet is deafening. They thought walking away silently meant you didn't care, but now they realize it meant you finally cared about yourself more. And that shift, that sacred shift from self-sacrifice to self-respect, it doesn't create heartbreak, it creates accountability. And for someone who's not used to facing their own patterns, that's the real sting. Because now, every new interaction they have is measured against yours. The calm you carried, the presence you held, the steadiness you offered, and no matter how much they try to move on, the bar you set is still standing, quiet, unshaken, like a lighthouse they never realized was guiding them until it stopped shining in their direction. You didn't leave to teach them a lesson, but the silence you left behind became one. And no, they might never tell you this. They may never text, never apologize, never admit it. But that doesn't mean the regret isn't real. It just means they're not strong enough to face it out loud. Some people will swallow their truth because their pride tastes better than humility. But inside, they're full of what-ifs, full of unfinished thoughts, full of little moments that now feel like warnings they ignored. So if you're sitting there wondering if they ever look back, they do. Not to remember the noise, but to remember the lack of it. To remember how you chose silence instead of bitterness. How you didn't burn the bridge, you just stopped walking across it. That's what dignity does. It doesn't scream, it echoes. And that echo, it lingers far longer than any shouting match ever could. So if this speaks to your soul, if you've ever walked away, not because you stopped loving, but because you started respecting, write this in the comments right now. My dignity echoes. Let it be known. Let it be felt. Let it remind someone out there that power doesn't always show up with noise. Sometimes it shows up in silence and stays long after you've left the room. Stay with me. Because next, we're stepping into what happens when the ego starts losing the battle, and your calm becomes the thing they crave, but can't reach anymore. Number 8. Their ego tries to downplay it, but their soul feels the shift. They'll tell themselves you didn't matter, just to avoid admitting that you were the one thing that ever did. The ego never goes down without a fight. It clings, it masks, it lies. It doesn't cry, it rationalizes. It doesn't mourn, it rewrites the story to avoid accountability. So when you walked away peacefully, without drama, without begging, without one final emotional performance, their ego did exactly what egos do. It said, "Good, let them go. I didn't need them anyway." But the soul sat quietly in the background and started to grieve. Because the truth always shows up in silence, not in what they post, not in what they say to their friends, but in those moments when the world gets still and there's no more audience left to impress. That's when it hits, and it hits hard. They told themselves a story that you left because you were weak, that you gave up because you didn't care enough, that your silence was proof of detachment, not dignity. But as the days passed, and you didn't come back, didn't text, didn't chase, that story started to fall apart. Because you weren't silent out of indifference, you were silent out of respect, not just for them, but for yourself. And now, the ego's grip starts to crack. At first, just a little. A thought here, a memory there. But eventually, the questions become harder to ignore. Why haven't they reached out? Why do I still think about them every time I'm alone? Why does their calm haunt me more than anyone else's chaos? The soul doesn't care about pride. It doesn't care who was right or wrong. It only knows energy. And your energy? It was real, steady, safe, grounding. And now that it's gone, nothing feels quite right. They'll laugh a little louder around others, post a little more, pretend they're healed, but deep inside, something is off balance, because they didn't lose someone who screamed for their attention. They lost someone who deserved it and never asked twice. And that kind of loss doesn't fade. It lingers, because it wasn't just love that left. It was presence. Now they feel that shift in places they didn't expect. In music, in mornings, in the small routines you used to be part of, that one coffee shop you both liked, that one playlist, that one time they opened a message thread and realized there was nothing left to say. Not because it ended with closure, but because it ended with truth. Your truth. That you would no longer be part of a dynamic where your value had to be proven every time you showed up with your heart. You weren't playing the role of the one who stayed too long anymore. You became the one who knew when to leave, and leave with grace, and now they're stuck. Not between wanting you back, but between wanting the feeling back and knowing they can't recreate it with anyone else, because what they miss isn't just the version of you they remember. It's the version of themselves they only felt safe expressing with you. You held their softness, you saw their cracks, and you didn't use any of it against them. But now, the silence is the consequence, not punishment, not manipulation, just the natural weight of what happens when someone finally honors their soul more than someone else's ego. And they'll scroll, and they'll compare, and nothing will quite feel the same, because when you walked away without bitterness, you became unforgettable. You didn't leave a mess behind, you left a mirror, and in that mirror they see everything they once took for granted, now gone, and they're not mourning your words, they're mourning your presence, the steady presence that didn't ask for attention but deserved all of it. So don't ever think for a second that your calm was overlooked. Don't question if they noticed your peace. They noticed. Oh, they noticed. They just didn't know it would echo long after the last word was never said. And maybe they'll never say it out loud. Maybe they'll never send that message. Maybe they'll go their whole life pretending it didn't matter. But deep down, they'll carry it, quietly, privately, every time they meet someone new. Every time they replay your patience in their mind, every time they wish they could go back and actually see you for who you were, instead of assuming you'd never leave. But it's too late now, because when a soul like yours walks away without venom, without noise, it doesn't scream across the sky. It carves itself quietly into the air they breathe, and nothing smells quite the same after that. So if you're still carrying that final moment in your mind, wondering if they ever really felt it, let this be your reminder. They did. Maybe not with their pride, but with their soul. Absolutely. Write this in the comments right now if you feel this in your chest. I left with dignity. Let it be known, let it echo, not for them, but for you, so the world sees you, so you see you. So the next time someone tries to make you question your worth, they're already too late. And if this entire journey has opened something in you, if you've felt the shift, the silence, the growth, then don't just walk away, rise. Because the end of this chapter isn't about who misses you. It's about who you became the moment you stopped needing to be understood and started honoring your peace.